Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. A kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that had dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very casques that did affright the air at Agincourt? Oh, pardon. Since a crooked figure may attest in little place a million, and let us, ciphers to this great accompt, on your imaginary forces work. Suppose within the girdle of these walls are now confined two mighty monarchies, whose high upreared and abutting fronts the perilous narrow ocean parts asunder. Piece out our imperfections with your thoughts. Into 1,000 parts divide one man, and make imaginary puissance. Think when we talk of horses that you see them, printing their proud hoofs to the receiving earth. For 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings, carry them here and there, jumping o'er times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass. For the which supply, admit me, chorus to this history. Prologue like, your humble patience pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play. King Henry V has mounted a war against France in order to claim lands that he believes are rightfully his. In the midst of the siege of the city of Harfleur on the northern coast of France, King Henry entreats his men to follow him. Once more to the breach, dear friends, once more! Or close the wall up with our English dead! In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger. Stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood, disguise fair nature with hard favored rage. Then lend the eye a terrible aspect. Let it pry through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a galled rock, or hang and jutty his confounded base, swilled with the wild and wasteful ocean. Now set the teeth and stretch the nostril wide. Hold hard the breath and bend up every spirit to his full height. On, you noblest English, whose blood is fet from fathers of war-proof, fathers that like so many Alexanders have in these parts from morn till even fought and sheathed their swords for lack of argument. Dishonor not your mothers. Now attest that those whom you called fathers did beget you. Be copy now to men of grosser blood and teach them how to war. And you, good yeoman, whose limbs were made in England, show us here the mettle of your pasture. Let us swear that you are worth your breeding, which I doubt not, for there is none of you so mean and base that hath not noble luster in your eyes. I see you stand like greyhounds in the slips, straining upon the start. The game's afoot. Follow your spirit, and upon this charge cry, God for Harry, England, and St. George! Later in the war, King Henry and his nobles prepare to face a desperate battle where the French forces outnumber the English 5-1. When Henry's cousin Westmoreland voices a request for reinforcements from England, King Henry replies, "What's he that wishes so? My cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin. If we are marked to die, we are enough country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honor. No, faith, my coz, wish not a man from England. God's peace, I would not lose so great an honor as one man more, methinks, would share from me for the best hope I have. Oh, do not wish one more. Rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no sin in this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company that fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall see this day and live old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbors and say, tomorrow is Saint Crispian. Then will he rip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar old words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we brothers, for he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition, and gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, whilst any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's day. In fair Verona, where we lay our next scene, Romeo and his boon companion Mercutio are on their way along a street in order to crash the masked ball at the Capulet's house. Romeo is having second thoughts about going because of a portentous dream. This idea sparks the fiery Mercutio, and he retorts, oh, then I see Queen Mab hath been with you. She's the fairy's midwife, and she comes in shape no bigger than an agate stone on the forefinger of an alderman, drawn with a team of little atomies athwart men's noses as they lie asleep. Her wagon spokes made of long spinner's legs, the cover of the wings of grasshoppers, her traces of the smallest spider web, her collars of the moonshine's watery beams, the whip of cricket's bone, the lash of film, her wagoner, a small grey-coated gnat, not half so big as a round little worm pricked from the lazy finger of a maid. Her chariot is an empty hazelnut made by the joiner squirrel or old grub, time out of mind the fairies' coachmakers. And in this state she gallops night by night through lovers' brains, and then they dream of love. Or courtiers' knees that dream on curtsy straight, or lawyers' fingers the straight dream on fees, or ladies' lips the straight on kisses dream, which oft the angry mab with blisters plagues, because their breaths with sweetmeats tainted are. Sometime she driveth o'er a courtier's nose, and then dreams he is smelling out a suit. And sometime comes she with a tithe pig's tail, tickling a parson's nose as he lies asleep. Then dreams he of another benefit. Sometimes she driveth o'er a soldier's neck, and then dreams he of cutting foreign throats, of breeches, ambuscados, Spanish blades, of healths 5 fathom deep. And then anon drums in his ear, at which he starts and wakes, and being thus frighted, swears a prayer or two, and sleeps again. This is that very mab that plats the manes of horses in the night, and bakes the elf locks in foul, sluttish hairs, which, once untangled, much misfortune bodes. This is the hag, when maids lie on their backs, that presses them, and learns them first to bear, making them women of good carriage. This is she! Our scene is now the coast of North Wales, in view of Barcloley Castle. King Richard II hears the reports that his cousin, Henry Bolingbroke, whom he had exiled, is winning the support of the Welsh troops, both young and old, in his bid to recapture the lands and properties that Richard seized from Henry's father, the late John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster. King Richard's nobles paint so bleak a picture of his situation that, despite their subsequent attempts to console him, he succumbs to despair. King Richard speaks. No matter where, of comfort no man speak. Let's talk of graves, of worms and epitaphs. Make dust our paper, and with rainy eyes write sorrow on the bosom of the earth. Let's choose executors and talk of wills. And yet not so. For what can we bequeath save our deposed bodies to the ground, our lands, our lives, and all our Bolingbrookes? And nothing can we call our own but death, and that small model of the barren earth which serves as paste and cover to our bones. For God's sake, let us sit upon the ground and tell sad stories of the death of kings, how some have been deposed, some slain in war, some haunted by the ghosts they have deposed, some poisoned by their wives, some sleeping killed, all murdered. For within the hollow crown that rounds the mortal temples of a king keeps death his court. And there the antic sits, scoffing his state and grinning at his pomp, allowing him a breath, a little scene, to monarchize, be feared, and kill with looks, infusing him with self and vain conceit, as if this flesh, which walls about our life were brass impregnable, and humored thus, comes at the last, and with a little pin bores through his castle wall, and farewell, king. Cover your heads, and mock not flesh and blood with solemn reverence. Throw away respect, tradition, form, and ceremonious duty. For you have but mistook me all this while. I live with bread like you, feel want, taste grief, need friends. Subjected thus, how can you say to me, I am a king? Shortly thereafter, Henry Bolingbroke and his ally, the Earl of Northumberland, appear before Flint Castle in Wales, seeking an audience with the king. Richard, flanked by his nobles, appears atop the castle walls and addresses Northumberland. We are amazed, and thus long have we stood to watch the fearful of thy lawful king. And if we be, how dare thy joints forget to pay their awful duty to our presence? If we be not, show us the hand of God that hath dismissed us from our stewardship. For well we know no hand of blood and bone can gripe the sacred handle of our scepter, unless he do profane, steal, or usurp. And though you think that all, as you have done, have torn their souls by turning them from us, and we are barren and bereft of friends, yet know, my master, God omnipotent, is mustering in his clouds on our behalf armies of pestilence, and they shall strike your children yet unborn and unbegot, that lift your vassal hands against my head and threat the glory of my precious crown. Tell Bolingbroke, for yon methinks he stands, that every stride he makes upon my land is dangerous treason. He is come to ope the purple testament of bleeding war. But ere the crown he looks for live in peace, 10,000 bloody crowns of mothers' sons shall ill become the flower of England's face, change the complexion of her maid pale peace to scarlet indignation, and bedew her pastures grass with faithful English blood. We now shift our scene to a fabled forest outside of ancient Athens. Oberon, king of the fairies, is feuding with his queen Titania over her little changeling boy that Oberon wants for his own. Oberon is attended by that shrewd, knavish sprite called Robin Goodfellow, or Puck, a merry mischief maker that spends most of his time playing pranks. Now, as much as Oberon argues for the changeling, Titania is as firm in denying him. As Titania takes her leave, Oberon speaks. Well, go thy way. Thou shalt not from this grove till I torment thee for this injury. My gentle Puck, come hither. Thou rememberest, since once I sat upon a promontory and heard a mermaid on a dolphin's back, uttering such dulcet and harmonious breath, that the rude sea grew civil at her song, and certain stars shot madly from their spheres to hear the sea maid's music. That very time I saw, but thou couldst not, flying between the cold moon and the earth, Cupid, all armed. A certain aim he took at a fair vestal throned by the west, and loosed his love shaft smartly from his bow as it should pierce 100,000 hearts. But I might see young Cupid's fiery shaft quenched in the chaste beams of the watery moon, and the imperial votress pass it on in maiden meditation, fancy-free. Yet marked I where the bolt of Cupid fell. It fell upon a little western flower, before milk-white, now purple with love's wound, and maidens call it love in idleness. Fetch me that flower, the herb I showed thee once. The juice of it on sleeping eyelids laid will make or man or woman madly dote upon the next live creature that it sees. Fetch me this herb, and be thou here again ere the Leviathan can swim a league. Having once this juice, I'll watch Titania when she is asleep, and drop the liquor of it in her eyes. The next thing then she waking looks upon, be it on lion, bear, or wolf, or bull, on meddling monkey, or on busy ape, she shall pursue it with the soul of love. And ere I take this charm from off her sight, as I can take it with another herb, I'll make her render up her page to me. Hast thou the flower there? I pray thee give it me. I know a bank where the wild thyme blows, where ox lips and the nodding violet grows, quite over-canopied with luscious woodbine, with sweet musk roses and with eglantine. There sleeps Titania some time of the night, lulled in these flowers with dances and delight, and there the snake throws her enameled skin, weed wide enough to wrap a fairy in, and with the juice of this I'll streak her eyes and make her full of hateful fantasies. Oberon succeeds in anointing the eyes of his queen with the potent herb, but he can only imagine what transpires when she awakens until Puck returns with his report. Puck speaks. My mistress with a monster is in love. Near to her close and while she was in her dull and sleeping hour, a crew of patches, rude mechanicals that work for bread upon Athenian stalls, were met together to rehearse a play intended for great Theseus' nuptial day. The shallowest thick-skin of that barren sort, who, Pyramus, presented in their sport, forsook his scene and entered in a break, when I did him at disadvantage take. An ass's knoll I fix it on his head. Anon his Thisbe must be unthread, and forth my mimic comes. When they him spy, as wild geese that the creeping fowler eye, sever themselves and madly sweep the sky, so at his sight away his fellows fly, and at our stamp, here oar in oar one falls, murder cries, and help from Athens calls. Their sense thus weak, lost with their fears thus strong, made senseless things begin to do them wrong. For briars and thorns at their apparel snatch, some sleeves, some hats, from yielders all things catch. On in this distracted fear, and left sweet Pyramus translated there. When in that moment, so it came to pass, Titania waked, and straightway loved an ass. We now jump o'er times to another Richard, Duke of Gloucester, the future King Richard III, as he announces his bloody intentions. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious by this son of York, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the earth buried. Now are our brows bound with victorious wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarums changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute. But I, that am not shaped for sportive tricks, nor made to court an amorous looking glass, I that am rudely stamped and want love's majesty to strut before a wanton ambling nymph, I that am curtailed of this fair proportion, cheated of feature by dissembling nature, deformed, unfinished, sent before my time into this breathing world, scarce half made up, and that so lamely and unfashionable, that dogs bark at me as I halt by them. Why, I, in this weak piping time of peace, have no delight to pass away the time, unless to spy my shadow in the sun and descant on mine own deformity. And therefore, since I cannot to entertain these fair, well-spoken days, I'll make my heaven to dream upon the crown, and whiles I live to count this world but hell, until my misshaped trunk that bears this head be round impaled with a glorious crown. Yet I know not how to get the crown, me and home, and I, like one lost in a thorny wood that rends the thorns and is rent with the thorns, seeking a way and straying from the way, not knowing how to find the open air, but toiling desperately to find it out, torment myself to catch the English crown, and from that torment I will free myself or hew my way out with a bloody axe. Why, I can smile and murder whiles I smile, and cry content to that which grieves my heart, and wet my cheeks with artificial tears, and frame my face to all occasions. I can add colors to the chameleon, change shapes with Proteus for advantages, and set the murderous Machiavel to school. Can I do this, and cannot get a crown? Tut! Were it farther off, I'll pluck it down. Now along a London street, Lady Anne, widow of Prince Edward, follows the bearers of the corpse of King Henry VI, whom Richard recently murdered in the Tower of London. With shameless audacity, Richard stops the funeral procession and openly courts the lady. Now, though the hatred that Lady Anne bears for Richard knows no limit, his soft words and oily ways finally wear her down, and she consents to wear his ring. As Lady Anne departs, Richard speaks. Was ever woman in this humor wooed? Was ever woman in this humor won? I'll have her, but I will not keep her long. What? What? I, that killed her husband and his father, to take her in her heart's extremest hate, with curses in her mouth, tears in her eyes, the bleeding witness of my hatred by, having God, her conscience, and these bars against me, and I, no friends to back my suit at all, but the plain devil in dissembling looks, and yet to win her. All the world to nothing! Ha! Has she forgot already that brave Prince Edward, her lord, whom I some 3 months since stabbed in my angry mood at Tewkesbury? A sweeter and a lovelier gentleman, framed in the prodigality of nature, young, valiant, wise, and no doubt right royal, the spacious world cannot again afford. And will she yet abase her eyes on me, that cropped the golden prime of this sweet prince, and made her widow to a woeful bed? On me, that halts and am misshapen thus. I do mistake my person all this while. Upon my life, she finds, although I cannot, myself to be a marvelous proper man. Albeit charges for a looking glass, and entertain a score or two of tailors to study fashions to adorn my body. Since I am crept in favor with myself, I will maintain it with some little cost. But first, I'll turn yon fellow in his grave, and then return lamenting to my love. Shine out, fair sun, till I have bought a glass, that I may see my shadow as I pass. Our scene is now the Italian city of Messina. After the wars, Don Pedro and his officers Benedick and Claudio returned to visit Leonato, the governor of Messina, his daughter Hero, and her cousin Beatrice, with whom Benedick has a long history of trading witty barbs and jibes. Once welcomed into this pastoral setting, the pressures of battle relieved, Claudio immediately falls in love with Hero. His comrade Benedick, ever the confirmed bachelor, muses on Claudio's new behavior. I do much wonder that one man, seeing how much another man is a fool, dedicates his behaviors to love, will, after he hath laughed at such shallow follies in others, become the argument of his own scorn by falling in love. And such a man is Claudio. I have known when there was no music with him but the drum and the fife. And now had he rather hear the tabor and the pipe. I have known when he would have walked 10 miles afoot to see a good armor. And now will he lie 10 nights awake carving the fashion of a new doublet. He was wont to speak plain and to the purpose, like an honest man and a soldier. And now is he turned orthography. His words are a very fantastical banquet. Just so many strange dishes. May I be so converted and see with these eyes? I don't know. I think not. I will not be. Love may transform me to an oyster, till he have made an oyster. One woman is fair, yet I am well. Another is wise, yet I am well. Another virtuous, yet I am well. But till all graces be in one woman, not come in my grace. Rich she shall be, that's certain. Wise, or I'll none. Virtuous, or I'll never cheapen her. Fair, or I'll never look on her. Come not near me. Noble, or not I for an angel. Of good discourse, an excellent musician, and her hair shall be of what color it please God. And just then, Don Pedro, Leonato, and Claudio come upon the scene, and Benedick hides himself in order to overhear their conversation. Now, unbeknownst to Benedick, the three of them have conspired to deliberately mislead him into believing that sharp-tongued Beatrice is madly in love with him, but is too proud to show it. As soon as the three deceivers leave, Benedick, having swallowed the bait whole, emerges from his hiding place and speaks. This can be no trick. The conference was sadly born. They have the truth of this from Hero. They seem to pity the lady. Seems her affections have their full bent. Love? Me? Why, it must be requited. I hear how I am censured. They say I will bear myself proudly if I perceive the love come from her. And they say, too, that she will rather die than give any sign of affection. I did never think to marry. I must not seem proud. Happy are they that hear the detractions and can put them to mending. They say the lady is fair. 'Tis a truth, I can bear them witness. And virtuous. 'Tis so, I cannot reprove it. And wise, but for loving me. By my troth, it is no addition to her wit, nor no great argument of her folly. For I will be horribly in love with her. I may chance have some odd quirks and remnants of wit broken on me because I have railed so long against marriage, but doth not the appetite all? A man loves the meat in his youth he cannot endure in his age. Shall quips and sentences and these paper bullets of the brain from the career of his humor? No! The world must be peopled. When I said I would die a bachelor, I did not think I should live till I were married. Our scene is now Rome in 44 BC. Julius Caesar's popularity has grown to the point where many senators believe that the people will crown him king. Mark Antony, on the Feast of Lupercal, Mark Antony, Caesar's most devoted friend, presents him the crown 3 times, which Caesar refuses, each time more reluctantly. Meanwhile, 2 Roman senators, the fiery Cassius and Brutus, the noble Stoic, step aside from the ceremony, and Cassius uses the opportunity to express to Brutus his opinions of Caesar. Cassius speaks. Well, honor is the subject of my story. I cannot tell what you and other men think of this life, but for my single self, I had as lief not be, as live to be in awe of such a thing as I myself. I was born free as Caesar, so were you. We both have fed as well, and we can both endure the winter's cold as well as he. For once upon a raw and gusty day, the troubled Tiber chafing with her shores, Caesar said to me, "Darest thou, Cassius, now leap in with me into this angry flood and swim to yonder point?" Upon the word, accoutred as I was, I plunged in and bade him follow. So indeed he did. The torrent roared, and we did buffet it with lusty sinews, throwing it aside and stemming it with hearts of controversy. But ere we could arrive the point proposed, Caesar cried, "Help me, Cassius, or I sink!" Aye, as Aeneas, our great ancestor, did from the flames of Troy upon his shoulder the old Anchises bear, so from the waves of Tiber did I, the tired Caesar. And this man is now become a god, and Cassius is a wretched creature and must bend his body if Caesar carelessly but nod on him. He had a fever when he was in Spain, and when the fit was on him, I did mark how he did shake. 'Tis true, this god did shake. His coward lips did from their colour fly, and that same eye whose bend doth all the world did lose his lustre. I did hear him groan. Aye, and that tongue of his that bade the Romans mark him and write his speeches in their books, alas, it cried, "Give me some drink, Titinius," as a sick girl. Ye gods, it doth amaze me, a man of such a feeble temper should so get the start of the majestic world and bear the palm alone. Why, man, he doth bestride the narrow world like a colossus, and we petty men walk under his huge legs and peep about to find ourselves dishonorable graves. Men at some time are masters of their fates. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves that we are underlings. Brutus and Caesar. What should be in that Caesar? Why should that name be sounded more than yours? Write them together, yours is as fair a name. Sound them, it doth become the mouth as well. Weigh them, it is as heavy. Conjure with them. Brutus will start a spirit as soon as Caesar. Now in the name of all the gods at once, upon what meat doth this our Caesar feed that he is grown so great? Age, thou art shamed. Rome, thou hast lost the breed of noble bloods. When went there by an age? since the great flood, but it was famed with more than with one man. When could they say, till now that talked of Rome, that her wide walks encompass but one man? Now is it Rome indeed, and room enough, when there is in it but one only man. You and I have heard our fathers say, there was a Brutus once that would have brooked eternal devil to keep his state in Rome as easily as a king. Later that evening, Brutus is kept awake by the echo of Cassius's words. Brutus paces his gardens, deliberating. It must be by his death. And for my part, I know no personal cause to spurn at him, but for the general. He would be crowned. How that might change his nature, there's the question. It is the bright day that calls forth the adder, and that craves wary walking. Crown him, that, and then I grant we put a sting in him that at his will he may do danger with. The abuse of greatness is when it disjoins remorse from power. And to speak truth of Caesar, I have not known when his affections swayed more than his reason. But 'tis a common proof that lowliness is young ambition's ladder, whereto the climber upward turns his face. But when he once attains the upmost round, he then unto the ladder turns his back, looks in the clouds, scorning the base degrees by which he did ascend. So Caesar may, then lest he may, prevent. And since the quarrel will bear no color for the thing he is, fashion it thus, that what he is augmented would run to these and these extremities, and therefore think him as a serpent's egg, which hatched, would as his kind grow mischievous, and kill him in the shell. In the Senate House, on the fateful Ides of March, a group of conspirators led by Cassius and Brutus draw close to Caesar under the pretext of begging a plea for mercy on Publius Cimber. Caesar rebukes them, saying, I could be well moved if I were as you. If I could pray to move, prayers would move me. But I am constant as the northern star, of whose true fixed and resting quality there is no fellow in the firmament. The skies are painted with unnumbered sparks. They are all fire, and every one doth shine. But there's but one in all doth hold his place. So in the world, 'tis furnished well with men, and men are flesh and blood and apprehensive. Yet in the number I do know but one, that unassailable holds on his rank unshaked of motion. And that I am he, let me a little show it, even in this, that I was constant Cimber should be banished, and constant do remain to keep him so. The conspirators close in on Caesar, and one by one plunge their daggers into his body. When Brutus finally stabs as well, Caesar falls and dies. Other senators flee in panic and alert the gathering crowd outside. Soon, Mark Antony gradually enters the bloody arena, pays homage to the fallen body of Caesar, and humbly asks permission to speak in his funeral. Brutus consents, all the conspirators leave the room, and Antony is left alone with the body of Caesar. Oh, pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth, that I am meek and gentle with these butchers. Thou art the ruins of the noblest man that ever lived in the tide of times. Woe to the hand that shed this costly blood. Over thy wounds now do I prophesy, which like dumb mouths do ope their ruby lips to beg the voice and utterance of my tongue. A curse shall light upon the limbs of men. Domestic fury and fierce civil strife shall cumber all the parts of Italy. Blood and destruction shall be so in use and dreadful objects so familiar that mothers shall but smile when they behold their infants quartered with the hands of war, all pity choked with custom of fell deeds, and Caesar's spirit, ranging for revenge with Ate by his side, come hot from hell, shall in these confines with a monarch's voice cry, hark! And let slip the dogs of war, that this foul deed shall smell above the earth with carrion men groaning for burial. On the steps of the Capitol, Brutus first addresses the angry mob and gains their sympathy. Antony enters with the body of Caesar, and before he departs, Brutus bids the crowd stay and listen to Antony's speech. With great resistance from the crowd at first, Antony begins his funeral oration. Gradually, beginning to win their sympathies, he gains their permission to approach them as they surround the body of Caesar. Antony speaks. If you have tears, prepare to shed them now. You all do know this mantle. I remember the first time ever Caesar put it on. It was on a summer's evening in his tent that day he overcame the Nervii. Look, in this place ran Cassius' dagger through. See what a rent the envious Casca made. Through this the well-beloved Brutus stabbed, and as he plucked his cursed steel away, mark how the blood of Caesar followed it, as rushing out of doors to be resolved if Brutus so unkindly knocked or no, for Brutus, as you know, was Caesar's angel. Judge, O you gods, how dearly Caesar loved him. This was the most unkindest cut of all. For when the noble Caesar saw him stab, ingratitude, more strong than traitor's arms, quite vanquished him. Then burst his mighty heart, and in his mantle muffling up his face, even at the base of Pompey's statue, which all the while ran blood, great Caesar fell. Oh, what a fall was there, my countrymen. Then I and you and all of us fell down, whilst bloody treason flourished over us. Ah, now you weep, and I perceive you feel the dint of pity. These are gracious drops. Kind souls, what weep you when you but behold our Caesar's vesture wounded? Look you here. Here is himself, marred, as you see, with traitors. Good friends, sweet friends, let me not stir you up to such a sudden flood of mutiny. They that have done this deed are honorable. What private griefs they have, alas, I know not, that made them do it. They are wise and honorable, and will no doubt with reasons answer you. I come not, friends, to steal away your hearts. I am no orator as Brutus is,